inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV with Rodney Orr and Gary Harris.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Tider Insider TV, the Iron Bowl edition, I should say, presented each and every week by Buffalo Rock. Tonight, with the holidays upon us, Rod, I thought I better go ahead and have a Diet Pepsi tonight.
There you go.
Because I'm going to be partaking heavily on Thursday. That's good. I've been running today.
Running?
Yeah, just busy.
So
that really
I thought you meant literally running.
Well, I have been running some, not exercise running, but just running to get everything done. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm Gary Harris. And Rod, later on in the show, we're going to have a special guest, a former Alabama football player who knows what it's like to be a big favorite in the Iron Bowl and then have to really battle to get the win. We'll ask him if there's any comparison between that team he played on, that was a big favorite against Auburn, and this year's team, which is a 30-plus point favorite. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the business at hand, and that is this Saturday's game, 2:30 p.m. at Bryant-Denny Stadium against the Auburn Tigers. Alabama more than a 30-point favorite in this game, anywhere from 31 to 33 I've seen. And, Rod, when you take a look at the numbers, it's really not a surprise. The Crimson Tide is 10-1 overall, 6-1 in the SEC. Auburn is 3-8, 0-7 in the conference, on the verge of going winless in the SEC. That's hard to imagine. You're talking about a tale of two seasons. Nick Saban has established himself as the best coach in the SEC and the country. Gene Chizik, despite winning a national championship just 2 years ago, is on the hot seat. Many feel like Saturday's game could be his last as the Auburn head coach. Alabama starts a quarterback that's won a national championship, a fourth-year junior who is an All-American candidate. Auburn goes with a redshirt freshman, or true freshman, I should say, true freshman that's only started a handful of games. So when you look at it on paper, Rod, you can see why Alabama is such a big favorite. But as we like to say, particularly when it comes to rivalry games, they're not played on paper, they're played on grass.
They are. But, you know, in Auburn, you mentioned some of their personnel, Gary. They're starting 2 freshman offensive linemen, 2 sophomores, and a senior. So they're really young up front offensively. They've struggled defensively. Anytime you give up 191 yards a game rushing, you know, you've got issues in the SEC, and Auburn has not been able to stop the run. That's killed them. And last week, I think you mentioned that they were actually giving up over 200 yards a game before the game against Alabama A&M. So they really struggled defensively. They're giving up 415-plus yards a game. You know, they've given up more points than they score. That's never a good stat. 26 points they give up, but they allow defensively. They only average 20 points a game offensively.
And if Alabama didn't have enough incentive, and it already did with a chance to win the SEC West, go in Atlanta for the SEC Championship, but the events of this past Saturday night, with Kansas State losing to Baylor, Oregon losing to Stanford, that's put Alabama back to number 2 in the BCS. Notre Dame is number 1. So you would assume if Alabama wins this game and wins the SEC Championship game against Georgia, the Tide would play for the National Championship game again. If there were any chance that Auburn might catch Alabama napping, I think Saturday night took care of that.
Well, that's certainly, you know, when you're an Alabama football player in the position that they were in, and then the 2 losses by Kansas State and Oregon certainly put Alabama in a position once again to, if they take care of business in the next 2 games, to play for the national championship. Certainly that ups the stakes dramatically in this game against Auburn. It's certainly, you don't beat Auburn, you don't even have an opportunity to play in the SEC championship game.
I know you looked over the rosters, you've studied the numbers, you pointed out some of them earlier. Anywhere that you look at these 2 teams, and do you say there's any potential advantage for Auburn? Maybe special teams, is that even an advantage? Is there anywhere that you see a potential advantage for Auburn on the field?
Well, I really
Saturday?
don't.
Okay.
You know, I don't. I think, you know, when you look at Auburn, how young they are, certainly, you know, we talked about some of their personnel there, and, you know, they're in turmoil. I mean, when you look at teams going into games like this, you look at the team that's playing with consistency, chemistry, and all of those things, how important that is. And when you have a team on the other side that's in utter turmoil, that may be losing their coach, certainly there's strong speculation that could happen as early as next week. I mean, you know, that's a difficult spot to be in. Rarely does a team in a game like this, that when there's such dramatic differences, really have much of an opportunity or chance to win the game, in my opinion.
All right, one more question in regards to this game. If Alabama wins, like most people assume they will, let's talk about what it does to the rivalry. Since Coach Bryant's retirement, Auburn has easily been even with Alabama, if not a little bit ahead, in terms of the series head-to-head. But if Alabama wins, that would be 4 of the last 5. If they were to win by a blowout, that would be 3 blowouts in the last 4 years. They won 36-0 in 2008, 42-14 last year. Would this game and with Auburn in turmoil the way they are, would it go ahead and I know every year it's different. We like to say that, but Alabama would clearly be on top in this rivalry.
In the last several years, yeah, last few years, obviously, Tuberville had, 6 in a row?
That's right.
It's been a little bit streaky, as we know, but since Coach Bryant, I think Auburn's, 16-13 over the last 29 games. This will be the 30th game since Coach Bryant retired, and it's, Auburn has a little bit of an edge. Of course, Alabama had a period there late, 2000, when the NCAA hit Alabama. Certainly there was a lot of turmoil through those years, and Auburn kind of took advantage of that, I felt like 2003 through 2007. All
right, let's take a look at the Auburn quick facts. The head coach, of course, is Gene Chizik. Will that be the case following Saturday? We'll have to wait and see. You see the 2012 overall record, 3-8, and the unbelievable 0-7. If Alabama wins, Auburn would go over in the league. Some key players there, we mentioned Wallace. They do have two good running backs, different styles, but Mason and McCaleb both can generate a lot of yardage on the ground.
Well, you remember Ontario McCaleb. Now, you're talking about a way that Auburn can score. Alabama's been a little bit prone, as you know, Gary, to kickoff returns, and McCaleb had one last year, an 89-yarder or 87-yarder in that game. Otherwise, Auburn would not have, they did have a defensive touchdown. But, that's an area where certainly Auburn could generate some points is in the kick return game.
A couple of pass rushing defensive ends, and Ford and Corey Lemonnier, who I didn't put on there. Emory Blake, a wide receiver who makes a lot of plays. Darren Bates, a linebacker that has been around the block for a long time. Seems like he's been there forever. But all in all, you would think that Auburn is a little bit short in terms of personnel. Well, we were talking about incentive for Alabama. The players that were on the team in 2010 won't forget, nor will the coaches, what happened the last time Alabama and Auburn met in the Iron Bowl in Bryant-Denny Stadium. The Crimson Tide jumped out to a 24-point lead, 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. Probably should have been a lot larger than that, but Auburn hung around. They cut it to 24-7 with some really weird plays in that second quarter to get it to within a workable margin at halftime. Let's go ahead and roll the video of 2010 and talk about this game. This was a game that was so strange in so many ways. Alabama preseason #1 that season, had lost a couple of times to South Carolina and LSU. Auburn had vaulted to #1 behind Cam Newton, but Alabama came out like a house of fire. And not only did it look like the Crimson Tide would win the game, it looked like it was going to be a blowout.
Yeah, they did, and sometimes that happens in this game. You remember the '94 game, Alabama jumped on Auburn 21-0 and had to hold on to win 21-14. There you see Julio Jones. This was all in the first quarter, Gary. Here's a throw to Darius Hanks I believe it was Hanks for the touchdown, made it 21-0, and Alabama seemed to be on their way. I don't know if you put the play in there, but it was the play that turned the whole game around, in my opinion, was when Mark Ingram had the ball punched out and it rolled. Rarely will you see a play like that.
Here's a strange play. Trent Richardson drops a touchdown pass. Alabama had to settle for a field goal, and it was 24-0, and then Auburn, as we mentioned, gets on the board before halftime, late second quarter there. Mark Barron, you saw him go for the strip. He hurt his collarbone right there on that play and would be involved in a huge play in the second half where he could not go for a play. There was an interesting play there where Anthony Steen got beat. Nick Fairley got the sack. The ball laid on the ground, and Auburn came up with it. And here's the play, Rodney, that you were referring to. Strange play.
Unbelievable. I mean, watch, the ball was punched out about the 19-yard line. It must have rolled 25 yards within, 8 inches of the sideline. The boundary rolls to the back of the end zone. Auburn recovers. Wow.
But Auburn came back and won it, 28-27. And remember, Alabama has still only won one time in Bryant-Denny Stadium. That was in 2008, 36-0. Auburn won a couple way back around the turn of the century. But since the Iron Bowl moved to Bryant-Denny in 2000, Auburn won in 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006. Alabama 2008, Auburn again in 2010. So that's even another reason for Alabama to want to get it done on Saturday to reestablish home field in this rivalry against Auburn. Well, still to come tonight on Tider Insider TV. In 1992, Alabama was 10-0 and ranked #2, while Auburn limped in at 5-4-1 with Pat Dye on his way out. Does it sound familiar? Alabama was a big favorite, but it was a really tough football game. We'll talk with someone that played in that game and ask if there are any comparisons between 1992 and 2012. Also, later on in the program, Tider Insider TV will be taking your phone calls and answering your emails. As always, the number there on the screen to get in touch with us, 205-348-9882, or you can email us at titv@wvuatv.com. Stick around. You're watching the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the one, the only award-winning Tider Insider TV. Welcome back to Tider Insider TV. We don't often have guests on TITV. We kind of hold that for Crimson Tide Kickoff on Saturday mornings, but Martin Houston has been with us on Crimson Tide Kickoff, and Of course, Martin, a fullback at UA from 1989 to 1992, 3-1 against Auburn in his playing career. Martin, good to have you with us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're sporting that national championship hardware there on your right hand.
Absolutely.
1992.
Absolutely.
And that's the game we want to focus on. Your senior year, Alabama was 10-0, ranked number 2. Had to win that game, though, against Auburn. As Gene Stallings like to say, you hadn't won anything yet. And they were 5-4-1 going in. Pat Dye was a lame duck coach. You were a big favorite in that game, but they fought and scratched. And a lot of people don't remember that was a 0-0 game at halftime. They came out in the third quarter, were moving the football nearly to midfield when Antonio Langham struck, as he would against Florida the next week, and got it to 7-0. And then the defense in the running game kind of took over. Your impressions of that game and what you remember about it, and how tough a game it was, even though you guys were expected to win.
Well, you know, Auburn did have a lot of talent, I think, at that point, and they had a much older team than they do this year. They just had not been able to put it all together. As you said, Coach Dye was on his way out, had a disappointing season, and that senior class had been labeled as one of their best ever, and had a disappointing season. So I think they were trying to I think he announced his leaving to try to create some momentum, and when he did that, I think it gave him some momentum going into that game. And it's the Auburn-Alabama game.
Yeah, and when you go into a game like this and you're heavily favored, as you were in '92, as Alabama is this year, going against, you know, in a rivalry game, you know, Martin, sometimes a team that's heavily favored kind of plays up tight. I thought that when I remember back to that, here's Langham's pick in the third quarter, it was a 0-0 football game. I mean, did you feel, were you a little tight offensively?
As I told my children last week, going into last week's ball game with Oregon and Kansas State, I said it's different when you're chasing. But all of a sudden, when you're in that position where you're the chased, you play tighter, and you don't make the right cuts, and you're a little slow on the blocks, and you're exactly right. I think we went into that game with so much pressure, having won so many games in a row, but the reality of it is we had not won anything at that point. And all the pressure on that was on us, and Auburn had nothing to lose, so they played really hard.
Yeah, more fun being the hunter than the hunted. There's no doubt about
Absolutely.
it. Of course, you work to be the hunted, so you can be in the position that Alabama's in this year. Let's focus on this year's game. Final question for you. You guys did handle it in 1992. You took care of business. Obviously, Alabama's a 30-plus point favorite this year, a chance to win 3 national championships in the BCS era in the last 4 years, established themselves as the dominant team in the Alabama-Auburn rivalry. As a former player, how do you see this Saturday's game turning out?
I see Auburn coming out like they always do, like you can always expect in this game. Early on, there's going to be a lot of emotion, and you'll see that. But when you look at the two teams, I just don't see the game staying close for very long if Alabama plays their game. But in the Iron Bowl, there's been some crazy things happen, but I don't think there's enough in the tank at Auburn to do more than make this close early.
Yeah, unfortunately for Auburn, fortunately for Alabama, Cam Newton's not running out of that tunnel on Saturday. He's going to be running out on Sunday for the Carolina Panthers. Thanks to Martin Houston for joining us. Still to come, Rodney and I will have our Iron Bowl predictions. And up next, your phone calls and emails, 205-348-WVUA. Give us a call now. Thanks to Martin Houston for joining us. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Enjoyed that visit with Martin Houston going down memory lane, 1992.
I think he was a leading rusher in that. We should have asked him that. I think he got like 19 carries. I mean, how often does a fullback? But he had a big day.
Not anymore, that's for sure. Most of the time, we don't even see a fullback. Hey, time to take some phone calls. Let's stay right here in Tuscaloosa and start it off with Joseph. Joseph, what's up?
What's going on, Gary? Rodney, what's happening with you?
Hey, Joseph.
Hey, but peep this out. Now, I'm not going to say overlook Auburn, but I believe we're going to beat them. But let me ask you this. Let's say we played in the SEC Championship. What are some of the weaknesses of the Georgia Bulldogs?
Well, first of all, Joseph, Georgia's extremely talented. You know, when you look at them overall as a team, I mean, yeah, they have as much talent, maybe more than anyone in the SEC. I mean, they're certainly very talented defensively. You know, they have been banged up at wide receiver. They've lost a couple of their top wide receivers. They have 2 outstanding young freshman tailbacks in Keith Marshall and Todd Gurley. Of course, everyone knows about Aaron Murray, their outstanding quarterback. He's set a lot of records over there. And, you know, defensively, they're very talented. Everyone knows about Jarvis Jones, their outside pass rusher. But if you want to know about a weakness, I mean, it's really hard to say weakness. It's all relative. But they have struggled a little bit offensively up front, Gary. They've been, you know, offensively their line has not quite been as consistent as they had hoped it would be. But, you know, it's hard to really pick many many things wrong with that team, Joseph.
If Alabama wins against Auburn, we'll certainly talk more about the Georgia SEC Championship game next week. All right, let's go to Bessemer and talk to John. John, how are you?
Gary, what's up, man?
Hey, man.
Hey, man, I want to know what's Alabama got to do to beat Auburn, man, later.
All right, John. Well, they just need to play well. As we've talked about the entire program, Rodney, Alabama's a better football team. If they play well, they're going to win the game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's pretty simple. I think if Alabama really, we talked about a stat, Gary, the fact that Auburn has a difficult time stopping the run. And I mean, anytime you do that, anytime you have an issue stopping the run and you're playing a team like Alabama, who that's their forte, that's what they do, I mean, you're in trouble.
All right, one more phone call this segment. Let's go to Coleman and talk to Johnny. Johnny, hey, how are you?
Hey, guys, how y'all doing?
Very well.
I'd like to change it up a little bit, talk about the hoops. I think the men doing a great job, 4-0, won the tournament in Madison Square Garden, looking pretty good. What do y'all think?
Hey, so far so good, Johnny. You said it. You know, 4-0, you can't be any better than that. They won that 2K Sports Classic in Madison Square Garden, beating two quality programs, Oregon State, and then blew out Villanova in the championship game. First game of the year, Rodney, against a team that we knew was going to be good, South Dakota State. They get a buzzer beater to win that one. They win a close one against Oregon State. So they're building some momentum. I'll tell you this, Johnny, and Rodney, we've talked about it. They've got some athletes. They can press you. They can run. If they shoot the basketball, they can be dangerous. When they make shots, they can play with a lot of people. All right, more phone calls and emails right after this. Predictions still to come, but we're going to try to squeeze in a couple more phone calls. Let's go to Moundville and talk to Keisha. Keisha, welcome into the program.
Hi, how are y'all?
Very well, thank you.
Yes, my question is, I'm not for sure if it was the first game that Alabama played or if it was the second game that they played away from home. And my question is how did Eric Waters, when he got hurt, how did he come out of it?
All right, you're going to have to remind me who Eric Waters plays for, Keisha, because right off the top of my head, I can't remember.
I believe he must have played for the Michigan team.
Well, I don't recall the play you're talking about. I can tell you this: there's been nobody that Alabama's played. I do remember a couple of Michigan guys getting hurt for the season. I don't know the answer to your question. I'm sorry.
I don't recall that.
Okay. All right, but thanks for calling in. If I can find out, you're certainly welcome to call me here at the station, and I'll get that information for you. All right, let's move on and take an email or a phone call. What are we going to do here? Take to James in Rainbow City. James, go ahead.
Hey, guys.
Hey,
yeah,
James.
go ahead, James.
My question is this. Do you think that Alabama will overlook Auburn? Because I think that's what happened in the Texas A&A game. Because at the beginning of the season, we talked, and I brought that up, because I don't think they thought that was an SEC team.
Right.
And with two losses, that they would come in here and put up such a fight. And, you know, Auburn put up a great fight against LSU.
Right. Okay, yeah, I don't think they will, as we've talked about during the show, James. I just don't think Alabama will overlook Auburn. I think Texas A&M had a lot better football team than Auburn, and I think that was probably the reason Alabama lost. I think Alabama will be ready to play on
Well,
Sunday.
first of all, Auburn does not have, you mentioned Cam Newton, they don't have Johnny Manziel. I mean, A&M came in, A&M is a good football team. They caught Alabama at a good time, coming off that emotional win over LSU. I mean, it's difficult to play those teams in a streak like that. They're very tough opponents, and A&M caught Alabama at a good time. And, you know, again, personnel-wise, Auburn's not Texas A&M.
All right, predictions when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Titv. You know, I went in to pay my power bill today, Rodney, and somebody saw my shirt, and the lady was like, man, that is a beautiful shirt. Where did you get that? And I said, of course, at the Locker Room, Original Elephant Wear, the home of the Original Elephant Wear, located on the University Strip. The Locker Room is a Tuscaloosa tradition since 1964. You can see Rodney and I outfitted again in shirts, and you got a nice tie on that you just got at the Locker Room. You'll go over there. They will size you up, fit you up, and whether it's Locker Room or whether it's Elephant Wear or something else, Rush and Alex and those guys can.
Well, they're pros.
They can get you
I'll
set.
tell you, Mr. Gatewood, he's one of a kind now. He's a pro. Rush does a great job as well.
It is located, as I said, right on the University Strip, the Locker Room, home of the Original Elephant Wear. Check them out, or you can check them out online and browse their inventory there as well. All right, Rodney, it's time to make predictions. So far, we're just like the Alabama football team. We predicted Alabama to win every game they played this year. They lost to A&M, so we're 10-1, just like the Tide, and now it is Iron Bowl time. How do you see it?
Well, I tell you what, Gary, you know, people talking about Alabama overlooking Auburn. All you have to do is look back to 2010. I think there was a sign that somebody put up, whether it was Scott Cochran, Nick Saban, or whoever came up with it, that said never again. Well, here we are for the first time since then. in Tuscaloosa with Alabama and Auburn, and trust me, I don't think Alabama's forgotten that, and the stakes are so high, Gary, certainly for Alabama. I pick Alabama 31-10, and that, you know, that might be a little bit of a conservative pick, but it is a rivalry game.
Well, it is, and I think Auburn's going to give it all they've got. You know, certainly, I think you're going to see some things in regards to their offense that we have not seen before this season. I think they're going to have some special plays put in. I'm not going to say they're going to try to trick it up to win the game, but they're going to try to catch Alabama off guard, whether it be in the kicking game. We know in the past they've tried onside kicks when you wouldn't expect it. There might be a fake punt. I mean, they've got nothing to lose, literally. Everybody expects them to lose the game. And in a rivalry game like this, we know in the past that can be a factor. But I just think the disparity between the two teams this particular year is too large. I think Alabama is going to win the football game. The question is by how many points. They're a 30-plus point favorite for a reason. And Auburn is trying to win its first SEC game of the year. I do think that this game will not be 21-0, believe it or not, like the game 2 years ago after the first quarter. But I think in the end it'll be a lot worse than that. Alabama beat them 42-14 last year at Auburn. I like the Tide to roll really, really big. I think the 10 is right, Rodney. I think Alabama offensively, though, is going to get a lot of points before this one's all said and done and move on to Atlanta with some momentum. I like Alabama to win it 48-10. But again, that's why they play the game, and Saturday they will do that. All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. It's dinner time. Tonight we're headed out to Cottondale, one of our favorite places. Going to see Tim and the good folks over at Southland Restaurant. Come out and join us tonight, about 7:15, 7:20, something like that. Remember, if you want to catch the show online, you can go to our website, WVUATV.com. For Rodney Orr and our entire Tider Insider TV crew, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching. Good night, and have a great evening.